Well, I guess a good place to start is the why. Why did we end up doing this piece of research together with Ian at the World Retail Congress? And I guess that journey started back in Rome at the last World Retail Congress. Prior to the Congress and post, we were really analysing the key topic of the Congress, which is all around retail transformation. And what we noticed was during the various debates, there was lots of discussion, obviously, around how to change retail models from, in essence, the old world to the new world. And they were detailed very much around, obviously, conversations around digital, omni-channel, technology, and the structure. But there was a real lack of conversation on leadership. And if we're going to move retail models from here to there, in essence, what does that mean for leadership? What does that mean for the style of leadership and the type of leadership? And do we need the same retail CEOs, or will we need different types of skills in the future? And if we need different, then what does difference look like? So that is where we started. And I guess it's really important to state what we wanted to do, which was, what we didn't want to do was to create a report which was our opinion. So here's the opinion of Green Park or the World Retail Congress on what retail leadership is about. What we wanted to do was to stimulate a debate amongst retail leadership on the future of retail leadership. So that's what we started to do. So the first thing we wanted to do is to create a global panel, which we did, and we were very thankful for the people that put their time into that. But there was over 100, so it was 120, I think, towards the end, global leaders that took part in our and became members of our global panel. And they were from all around the world. So there was a big chunk from the UK, from the US, Europe, here in the Middle East, and obviously Asia as well. And they were from different parts of retail leadership. So there were obviously a good number that were CEOs, chairs, non-exec directors, but also we wanted a slightly wider view as well. So we spoke to private equity, we spoke to city analysts as well. So all the stakeholders around retail leadership. So we engaged that retail panel through a number of conversations. And I guess there was a lot of detail from those conversations, which is all in the report. But the two key questions very much were, one, if you were going to hire a retail CEO today, right now, what would those skills and those blend of skills be required to be successful? And two, how would that vision potentially change for 2020? And that was fascinating. Like I said, that's all in the report. But I guess what we wanted to do is to compare that and contrast that with data as well. So then we looked at, and we started in the UK, we looked at the 30 biggest UK retailers, and we looked at their CEOs, and we drew out their profiles from the age of 16 all the way to their current roles as CEOs. And we mapped those out, every single step of the stage in their careers, what discipline, where they'd been, for how long, etc. And then we did the same task for what we call aspiring CEOs. So these are individuals that whose next step will be the CEOs. They're currently in operating board, main board -1. And I guess the report is a bringing together of those three data points, if you will. But what was really interesting to start off with was when we looked at current requirements from what our global panel said were important, the blend of skills. They pointed to more rounded skill sets, people with international experience, people obviously with digital experience. But when we compared and contrast that information to the current CEOs of the larger businesses that we looked at, there was a clear difference. If we look at that current population, over a third of them had, in essence, grown up in store operations experience, and really that's all the discipline experience they had as they progressed their careers until they became CEOs. And a quarter of them had only worked for one retailer in their career as well. There was very little evidence of further education, MBAs, etc., compared to other sectors around the world as well. And what we found was 95% of them were male, 97% were white as well. So that was the picture.
So not much diversity, and MBA was not perceived to be particularly important.
Yeah, a lot of people have grown up through the shop floor, and not much diversity, both from a a broader sense of diversity as far as sector outside of retail, as well as core diversity around gender, ethnicity, etc. as well. So that was interesting, and clearly there's a mismatch there. But more importantly, when we look to the future, when we look to the question around the 2020 vision of a retail CEO, that was really interesting. And those conversations we got down and condensed to, in essence, what we call the 8 DNA building blocks, the key competency, the 8 skills that a future retail CEO will require. And I'll go through them very quickly, but we can pick up on certain ones. But one was change agent. So I think that came across very loud and clear that we'll be looking for leaders in the future that have got experience and a track record of taking retailers from here to their change in infrastructure. 2 was customer champions. I mean, clearly we always talk about customers, and we've heard a lot about that today and back in Rome as well. But modern customer behavior, and what does that look like? And a real understanding of cross-channel behavior. 3 was collaborative leadership. So this was a really interesting point, actually. So there was a lot of debate around the different styles of leadership, obviously. And I think if we look historically to big retail models that are quite siloed, that naturally creates a command and control structure. And modern view was that we're going to need people working across teams in more matrix environments, and therefore we're going to need a different type of leader or leadership style. 4, attached to that, was emotional intelligence, a high level of emotional intelligence if we're going to be using teams and making successful teams. We also thought was digital ownership, and the panel was quite clear that the difference would be not just people that had had exposure to digital, but they would have had to own a P&L around the digital channel and show evidence of that.
And the technical side?
Yeah, the technical side was less important, but as long as they understood the commercial impact and they understood the levers that will be required around the impact around P&L was the key thing. And then next, around that, linking to that as well, was data and the understanding of data. So as we move, obviously, towards more digital, we're collecting more data. Decisions will need to be based, obviously, on data, and strategic decision-making and using analytical skills and data understanding from a big picture was important. And then also international experience. So obviously, we're here in Dubai. Last time we were in Rome. Retail brands are global now, obviously. And it's not good enough to sit in head office in an international business. You know,
what was particularly curious to me, Steve, was that there was apparently a mismatch between what the groups felt were the skills, technical skills and the personal characteristics required to do the job in 2020, and the capabilities of the people who, if they were in the jobs today, and if they were in the jobs in 2020, why 40% of them would not be perceived to be well suited for the evolving environment. So in other words, there was some mismatch between the skill base and the skills required.
Yeah, that was the key question that we asked at the end. Once we established the 8 key skills, we then went back to the panel to say, if existing cadre of leadership is still in situ in 2020, how would they rate against them? How would you compare and contrast against those 8 key skills? And you're right, there was a clear gap. So 45%, when we asked the global panel to rate them, 45% they said wouldn't have the right technical skills, and 39% wouldn't have the right personality traits to be future leaders against those 8 building blocks that we identified.